Welcome back to another exciting episode of Life in Cyber. I'm your host, Josh. I'm joined by Kenny, Shannon, and John. Today we have a special time travel episode. We're going to fill in both Life and Cyber with it. So let's get talking to it. Let's stick to it.
By the way, I was at a craps table. You guys were right. So
Nailed
thank you
it
for finding me.
Sweet.
Yes.
Did you win money?
I did because you weren't there.
Fuck you.
Now let's go back in time.
Or forward.
Something like that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. All right, so time travel. Would we do it? And where would you go? I guess I'll go first. I have a personal rule that if I ever had the opportunity to use a time travel machine, Shannon's calling me because he's an ass.
Every time.
Every time. Every time. I have a personal rule. I would never go back in time further back than the last birth of my last child. So that means I would only go back because out of the fear of modifying something and I'd lose him. Kind of like Back to the Future where like he goes back in time and it kind of screws up his family tree. I would hate to do that.
Are you worried that you're going to like go back and bang your mom and then you're never born again?
No.
So what? Explain to me your rule.
I have a personal rule that I would never go back further than, I guess, the conception of my last child.
Okay.
Because I'd want to make sure that all my children were stillborn when I came back.
Why would you say the conception and not the birth? Because there's a lot of things that can happen through that window, man.
I'm debating between birth and conception.
It's a long time.
A lot could change.
Well, that's if you don't believe in like butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go back in time, is it really the same timeline that you left, or is it now a new branch or a new timeline?
Yep.
Or are you in an alternate universe?
Ooh.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
kind of
Barry
have to
Allen.
figure out which theory are we subscribing to here. But let's assume time is linear and then think of it the Back to the Future way.
Yes. So how about you guys?
We'll get into the complicated stuff a little bit later.
I don't like to go in the past. I want to go in the future. Mainly because I want to learn like what the next big win is and do it before they do it.
One of the things that I used to do, and this was back when I was experimenting with interview questions, I want to say like 7 years ago or so, I was trying different things because I was reading a lot of data saying that like, hey, a curveball question can be useful to learn a lot about one person in a short period of time. And so I had one that said, would you rather go 300 years into the past or 300 years into the future if you had to pick, and why? Now, before I go into the theory behind this, I'm going to explain, like, I completely stopped asking these types of questions because I actually learned that during that, like, experience, people who don't speak English as a native language are at a disadvantage with those questions because they don't understand them. So if you're wondering, never ask that as an interview question. I learned my lesson. Don't do it. Anyway, the one that caught me off guard the most was, like, somebody said future, and then I asked why, and they're like, I don't want to go 300 years of the past. I'm like, why? They're like, medicine. I ain't trying to die.
No,
Like, all right, heard. Like, what was the average lifespan 300 years ago? Like 40 years?
Well, you might come across something that we've already eradicated, right? Oh no,
Yeah.
the Black Plague or
Smallpox.
There you go.
It's actually 35, I think, was the average life. I looked it up
even
once
worse.
because I was looking up like the average age during the Revolutionary War. I don't know why. I just went down that rabbit hole.
Well, you might trip and have to get your foot cut off. I don't know.
Exactly.
Valid. All right.
Well, we're talking about kind of talking a little bit about the closed time-like curves, right? We're talking like that's how quantum computing, they keep talking about it and how it's starting to work where like all the molecules can pass through the same space-time as everywhere, right? And so I don't know if any of you read anything about quantum entanglement is one of the terms. And as most of us, some of us, watched the documentary, but one of us didn't. But anyway, as we go through that, we could also, start thinking about, time is relative and how Einstein says that. So I don't know. If I had to pick something, I'd go in the future for sure. I don't want to go in the past.
I have to be
Why not
honest on the
both?
quantum point. Like, I know that quantum computing is a big deal right now. Where there's a lot of talks. We have a partnership with Google at CU Denver now, where we're going to actually like be building a quantum space, which is pretty cool. But I've been telling people, I'm like, I'm on the cusp where I'm going to have to learn it. But I was really hoping it would be after I retired. God damn it! I don't want to have to relearn everything.
Hey, math is hard, Kenny. You're gonna have to learn it. It's fine.
I've never taken a physics class in my life, and yet I still find it incredibly fascinating. So maybe it's time.
You can
Yes.
find
I think
it
it's time. It's
fascinating
time.
at a distance.
Physics is
What's that, Shannon?
awesome.
You can find it fascinating at a distance. There's no need to know it in depth. Like the majority of our conversations, I know at a distance until I get assigned homework, like watching a documentary, and then I try and watch a documentary, and then I get freaking
Bombarded by questions.
No.
Just kidding.
You're at a conference for the first week, and then the second week you've got me visiting, completely destroying your entire life for 5 days.
No, I have John in Spanish gaslighting me for watching the wrong documentary.
I don't think
Absolutely.
Hot Tub Time Machine is a documentary.
Well, I don't know.
No.
Let's put this fair. If we had a hot tub, right, and we want to make the hot tub time machine an actual time machine, how would we do this? And to be honest, I think you would need like a quantum time machine, so that way you could exist at all points in the timeline.
They're doing it again because
yeah, we could do this.
I watched an actual documentary after watching Hot Tub Time Machine to prepare for this, podcast, but fuck y'all. You're not going to know the truths now.
As much as I want to keep going with that, I don't think Shannon wants us to keep going down this line of questioning.
Well, I would go back in time, actually, because then I could alter the future.
So you
What would
want
you
to alter?
Yes.
What
If
would
I
you
could-
alter?
I'd knock off Hitler.
Hitler probably is the first one. I get you.
The Jewish community is one of the most hilarious peoples that I have ever known.
There's a reason why they're comedians and they're all in Hollywood. Gotta love them.
They have amazing food.
That too.
I go nuts for matzo candy every year. I would want to go back and see different things, like mysteries that we don't know, right? Because one of the things that always gets me, and this has been getting me a lot lately, because I've been seeing, we've been seeing a lot with like social media and just the power of propaganda today. But one of the things they've always said in history is the only history you learn is the history of the winner, right? And so you never quite learn exactly what happened to everyone else that is now gone. And so for me, like going back and learning some of those things, like how were the pyramids built? Like we understand some of it, we have theories, but we'll never really know. What happened with Stonehenge? How did that occur? What about dinosaurs? Did they actually exist? Is our like dating method actually accurate? Those types of things. Did dinosaurs have feathers or not? Like those are the types of things that I need answers to.
You wouldn't come
So you're
back
gonna
from
take the
that.
Star Trek method. Yeah.
I don't know if you'd come back from that. You might get stepped on as soon as you get there.
That's fine. Like it's to me, it's like, so I live in an apartment building and I have a general rule of thumb that if a mastiff jumps on me in the elevator and that's how I die, like I'll die happy. T-Rex stomps me to death, also happy.
All right. Step 1, active camouflage. Step 2, time machine. I got you.
Think about your cat, Kenny. You can't get stepped on by random things and just leave pizza all by yourself.
Yeah, let us know before you go in the past, please, just in case you never come back.
I mean, she's fat enough she could live off of herself for a year, but still.
Yeah, she'll be okay. It'll be fine. I have a life insurance policy that she'll benefit from.
Speaking of life, would you modify your life? Would you try to actually modify your life if you went in the past?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Because you have to think those events could change your own life.
Oh, absolutely. I would go in the past and buy 20 shares of Google, when it first comes out or something, and then put it in my name, and then be like, "Oh, look, it just magically appears when I turn 18 or something."
See, in Hot Tub Time Machine, it's actually legal, and you would know that if you watch the documentary.
I subscribe to the concept or the theory of the butterfly effect. So you may change one thing, but that may cause a ripple effect of a lot of other things, right? And so even you going back and just buying 20 shares of Google, that will change the entire world in some way. And who knows how. Personally, I say no. And this is where I'm going to go to the selfish side of it. Like on the macro scale, butterfly effect, what would happen? But for me personally, I just turned 35. One of the things that I hear a lot is that I've got a bit of an old soul and that I'm wise as fuck. I wouldn't have any of that without all the things that happened to me, right? So as much as I have had a lot of struggles in life and gone through quite a bit of things that I wish I didn't have to, it's what made me who I am today. So I don't know that I want to give that up because I know 20-year-old Kenny was quite the douche canoe. You all knew me, you know.
I think we were all a bit of a douche canoe, so we've all matured in our old ages, including
I'm a
the bald
delight.
man.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Your mama never said that, Shannon. Don't say that again.
But your mom did.
You did. I heard it.
did.
It was at your wedding.
I'm torn because if I could prevent like illnesses and things like that in myself and in my family, then maybe I would change some things about my life. Like if I could go back in time and stop my parents from ever picking up a cigarette or experimenting with tobacco, slap it out of their hands, stuff like that, probably.
But what if that was the reason you were conceived? Like, what if your mom was just walking down the street and saw your dad in the 60s or whatever with a cigarette? Okay,
Man,
wait, all right, I'm being rude. Let's say the 80s. So with a cigarette, and she's like, God, he looks hot. And that's what made it happen.
He must work out.
Or can I bum one off you? I hear that all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to say, right?
Mhm.
Like, what are going to be the ramifications of what you did? So, they didn't smoke cigarettes, but they now are crack addicts. It's crazy. It's hard to know.
His parents kind of are crack addicts some days. I hope they hear that.
I'm sure they will.
We all love them. Don't start. I haven't been invited to a barbecue in like ages, though.
You know,
so
they
there's
threw
something
like
wrong.
2 barbecues just because I asked them to this year, right?
I know. I'm not invited anymore.
Get
so-
absolutely destroyed.
You live in a different state. That's part of the rules.
Mhm.
What would you do, Josh?
I
You said you have a rule of not to go back, but would you change anything?
I mean, I think anything after that is fair game. Because yes, I agree. There's parts of me that I wouldn't be who I am because of that. But like I guess because my youngest Mason only is like just under 3, it's like the last 3 years I could probably change a few tweaks here or there. That shouldn't make
Your
too
hairline?
much of a change. That's too far back. The hairline thing's too far back. But maybe I go into the future and get the cure and just get it all cleaned up. And then I come back with a full set of hair.
They have
guys.
the cure now. You could get hair transplants.
No, that's too
It's a
much.
cure.
Off of someone.
That's a workaround. That's a workaround.
I'll donate some hair for you.
So, should humans have the ability? Like, is this something that, even like we're fantasizing about the idea and what we could do for ourselves, but should it be possible? Like, are we playing too far into, the God complex? What happens if there are these butterfly effects? And again, we're still assuming that time is linear in this case, which we'll get into
Mhm.
later about how complicated it might actually be. But what do you guys think? Like, is this even ethical?
Well, I don't think it's ethical, but once the technology is there, how are you going to stop someone from using it?
Yeah, you'd have to have time police.
How do
Right?
they
Because
stop
I
us
mean,
from
yeah, you got
using
ethical. What was that, Mando?
How do they stop us from using nukes now?
Well, that's more of a scare tactic. If you start using nukes, we're all dead. That's
I
really the
mean,
reason why the nukes.
we're assuming that these things are going to be publicly available, like in a phone booth, but
They'll be commercialized, expensive. It'll be the
Mhm.
same way that they're trying to privatize space travel now, right?
Well,
I would
Skynet's going to
assume
be a thing with AI. Are we going to stop inventing better AIs before it kills us? Probably not.
if there's a way for humanity to fuck things up, they'll find a way to do it.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
you've got and like we've talked about ethical consideration, right? We're talking about paradoxes and other responsibilities, but Kenny keeps coming back to the whole like societal impacts, right? Like historical preservation and resource allocation, and how do I find the real stories behind things? If you go back in the past and find out we were just complete douchebags, do we really want to know what the real past was? It might be scary.
Oh yeah,
Ignorance is bliss. Yeah.
but we could also learn a lot from it too.
But you could also take today's medicine and knowledge back in time and give it to them then.
Well, then now you're changing the change of power, right? What if you giving that medicine to somebody got in the wrong hands and for some reason Germany won World War? I'm sorry, just say that. Could we know of what today is going to be completely different?
We'd be speaking German, but we'd be healthy, wouldn't we?
That's if we're even
Well,
alive.
Well, you could also look at it the other way around. I love movies, so let's go with Minority Report. Let's talk about the other way around, where we're looking to the future. Oh, that person's going to be a serial killer. Are you able to then prosecute that guy for something he hasn't done yet or might not do?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one, right? Because I remember watching that movie as well, and they do try to catch him right before to be like, well, your intentions were there, but
You
it
would
never
have
actually happened.
you would have to subscribe to the fact that all of our lives are predetermined at that point.
There's
Well,
actually
we're talking
some-
about a linear progression, remember? We're assuming linear progression right now.
there's also some really solid theories right now of people who've been researching psychology and sociology saying that like free will doesn't exist as much as we think it does.
Yeah.
I was reading that last week. I wasn't intending to go there today, but it's an interesting topic. I do want to point out though, Shannon, you mentioned we would be speaking German, but at least we'd be healthy. Sure, and also every minority would be gone, an entire religion would be eradicated, etc., etc.
He said stopped World War II, but we would get the medicine, right?
No, he said, "What if Germany won World War?"
Oh, why'd you got to throw that in there?
That's what he said.
I didn't hear him. He mumbles. Stop giving head to your
I'm
mic.
pretty
and
sure
people
I'm
can
not
hear you.
mumbling to you. I'm pretty sure I'm not.
You need a headset that isn't bone induction.
Give you a bone induction.
Please don't.
That changes things.
Yeah,
That's the whole point, and this is why I like the idea of like going back to study, right? I want to know what people aren't telling us, what history has erased. I think that would be so fascinating.
me too. Observation only.
Stonehenge.
That was one of the things I mentioned.
Well, I think that's the big thing too, is like figuring out like, who's going to come up with these rules? There's going to have to be rules. Okay, Peabody, right? We're going to have to figure out how to, how do we use our Wayback Machine? How do we, do things where we're not going to interfere? And I love the idea about being like the whole grandfather paradox, or going back and figuring out, okay, how do we, go back as historian without affecting anything? And if time is not linear, let's say the butterfly effect is true, and you go back and you don't think you did something, but you being in the way and someone sidestepping you gets ran over by a car or whatever, and you now just killed the future president. Like, I mean, I think there's going to be things like, how do you fix that again? Do I need to send another team into the past to be like, hey, we can't have you here, and then screw it up even worse? Like, I don't know. I think it's like an never ending problem.
This kind of plays into an interesting idea as well, which was the Stephen Hawking idea that the reason why we know time travel isn't possible is because nobody has time traveled to our time, right? People would have chosen that at some point. And so there's a few theories behind that, and one of them being that, like, there's a limit of, like, they can only travel back to when the time machine was invented, potentially. Or, I'm going to throw a different one out there. What if they do create a mechanism where it's only observation and they're sitting here watching us all be ding-dongs? Just like the whole alien like theory of like they're already here, guys.
Well, what if they can't send them back, but they can watch us?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, right. Maybe it's just like a telescope instead of a travel thing.
One-way trip.
One-way trip is interesting.
Well,
If it was a one-way trip, would you do it?
Well, I learned from Endgame that you could go back in time and spend the rest of your life with your love, and I think there's kind of romantic. I think that's kind of romantic.
Yeah, if your love was 70 years old, sure.
I mean, Allie's going to get old at some point, and then I could just time travel back to when she was young again and live that life over.
You know, I might have a better example. Leonardo DiCaprio. What if
I'm
his
not with
current
him.
girlfriend wanted him to be her age for once?
I don't know why I was expecting a Titanic joke there, and
Get him on the door.
I think if it were a one-way thing, if I'm to guess, all of you would be very reluctant because of your families, right? Like you wouldn't want to leave your kids or anything like that.
Yeah.
what
Well,
if
it
they came
depends.
with?
There's other shows, right, where they go back in time, back to like prehistoric times. What if you can take your whole family because, well, we fucked up the earth so bad that it's dying, and this is the only way that you guys can continue on.
That'd be interesting. Mass travel, yeah, instead of just an individual.
Mhm.
I think for me, it would depend. Like, I don't have anything tying me to this mortal sphere, except for my cat, and actually, I love her, so maybe.
He'll take her with him. It's
But
fine.
if it were like one of those things that I was really passionate about, where maybe I could like report back data, let's say that like I wouldn't be able to come back, but maybe I could send some signals back saying like
A time capsule of some sort.
the Egyptians never existed. It was all like the gods all along, that kind of stuff. Who knows? Maybe they were right about, deity. It'd be fun to like go back and like confirm to modern day scientists like what is
Stargate
wrong.
program actually exists. I get it.
Yeah, it'd be kind of fun. So I don't know. That would be an interesting like profession, I think, especially if you found a lot of meaning in it and there was like some way that it could potentially support modern society. It would be something that I would, give myself up for sure.
Interesting.
I
And you
subscribe
can
to the
kill
greater
Hitler.
good concept. So
It's so fun to talk about time travel, even though, like, in the back of my head, I don't believe time travel is even possible. I don't think it can happen. So it's kind of one of those fun things to talk about in theory, but like, I don't know. Looking at nothing can go faster than the speed of light kind of idea, I think would be a requirement for time travel, and without it, there's no way for us to time travel. I think there's a way to bend time, right? Like if I want to go into the future, but really I'm not really going into the future. I'm bending time for myself and thinking about black holes at this point, right?
yeah, this kind of gets
Mhm.
into the theory and science of it, of like what is possible. And I would say that like based on Einstein's theory of relativity and super relativity, like they like going backwards in time is not possible. Like you would just experience time differently as far as like going forward. And I think that this actually one step I wanted to go a little bit further than, the research that we all kind of looked into is it's based on like if you want to think about movies like Interstellar got it the closest as far as like matching with scientific theory, right? The closer you are to the event horizon of a black hole, the stronger the gravitational pull, the slower time moves, right? Well, one of the things that I've been reading about is I'm obsessed with astronomy in my free time is gravity is not like finite. And in fact, gravity goes in waves. There are gravitational waves all around us and they often intersect and they affect space-time pretty much constantly. And so you would be experiencing time differently depending on those waves moving around you at all times, right? So there is a likelihood, especially if you can get close to an event horizon and live to tell the tale, that yeah, you could experience what you thought was 60 seconds while, everyone on planet Earth went through 600 years. That sure seems like time travel. But to the people that, knew you, it just seems like you died.
You disappeared. You were a missing person. Yep.
Well, it kind of reminds me of that episode. I'm a very big Star Trek fan, and there's an episode of Voyager where they kind of got stuck in the atmosphere of another planet that was going a lot faster than they are. Like it was time dilation. And to everyone on the planet, they were just a star. But they were moving so slowly to the people on the planet, they thought they were just, like a god at that point just because of their evolution. But like it was interesting to say, like, okay, if I can witness you, Kenny, going around this black hole, would you just look like a dot to me? You're not even moving.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the interesting theories behind, like, are there aliens out there too, right? Like, when we look through the sky, what would we see, right? There's so many different gravitational pulls on all of those different stars we see in the sky. Like, would we even see it moving? Because we're experiencing time differently. And just to kind of get into the level of detail of like how accurate this is, like satellites legitimately experience time differently than we do. Like the satellites that we use for time tracking at the moment have to be adjusted to match the actual time that we experience on the planet because the gravitational pull is different for us than for them.
How often do those need to be adjusted, John?
Honestly, daily.
Mm-hmm.
Like multiple times a day or just once?
Most of the time, it's just once a day because we're talking nanoseconds.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone knows what the nanoseconds are. I don't know it off the top of my head.
I don't know off the top of my
It's like
head either.
45,000 nanoseconds per day.
It's not
45,000 nano? That's 45 seconds, isn't it?
That might be 45 milliseconds.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's like like less than a second.
Yeah. But yeah.
It's enough for us to not notice every day, but over the course of a year, it would be inaccurate.
Very.
No, but it's kind of interesting to think about, like, why would a satellite out in space, why are their clocks different than our clocks on Earth? Like, if anyone knows how a clock works.
Well, and this is one where I was thinking about it while hearing about it. Like, obviously, the people who have come up with this are looking at it from a theoretical perspective, right? Mathematically, it's accurate. I was thinking of it mechanically because they keep talking about clocks and watches and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, yeah, why wouldn't mechanics slow down when gravity's pulling on them differently? And so to me, that's like, it's not necessarily honest about saying that time slows down. It's just saying that like the moving parts change, right? Like when we experience less gravity when leaving orbit or when entering orbit, right? Like we experience all of the different things around us differently. Liquids are different, right? It's very, I don't know. I'm not sure if you look at it from a clock perspective that that's accurate, but mathematically it is, and that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, and I was trying to kind of get into it a little bit more, but I mean, we're talking time dilation versus gravitational time dilation, right? I mean, that's really why satellites are different, is the gravitational time dilation. But that's just because in general relativity, there are three constants in the equation, right? Albert Einstein was way ahead of his time, as we all know, but we've got gravity, we've got the speed of light, and and we got the Planck constant, right? And those are the three that go into whether or not what is going to govern anything. So if you go faster, then two of the numbers have to change, right? And you've got a constant, so it's probably going to be a gravitational constant, right? Well, when you're dealing with a satellite, like in space, we're talking about geosynchronous orbit at this point, talking about GPSs. We're talking 22,000 miles up into space. Do you guys know where the parking orbit is for the planet? It actually isn't that much further. You're almost right outside the Earth's gravitational pull. So that's how far these things are out from us, to the point that gravity has very little effect on these satellites compared to something like Starlink, right? Something that's in LEO orbit. So I don't know. I think you were headed towards gravitational time dilation there, Kenny. I think is where you were trying to hit, right?
Yeah, and to point out parking orbit too, like the one thing that I think some people need to recognize as well is like if the moon didn't exist and you got to a certain point beyond orbit where you're outside the Earth's or like gravitational pull, like you're not going to just not experience gravity. You're going to experience gravitational pull of something else, right? And so our parking orbit exists because the moon exists, right? So there's an equal level of gravitational pull coming from the planet Earth as well as the moon at a specific distance. And that's where we tend to put satellites so we don't have to spend fuel on them all the time to keep them there. So that's another interesting like variable to add to this gravitational point is like, yes, gravity is is what's causing this type of time dilation. Throw in that you're getting like gravitational pulls from all of these different, beings, and by beings I mean planets, moons, suns, stars, whatever, all the time.
Something with mass.
Sometimes like, your mom.
You also get time dilation by the speed in which you're moving. So it's not just gravity, but at the speed you're moving as well. Like as you approach the speed of light, time slows down, or at least it feels like it does.
Correct.
So, in speaking of TV shows and movies, I've watched The Orville with Seth MacFarlane and his crews that he seems to always have. And they have this one episode in which they travel through time using a wormhole. And what they had to do is they realized they moved into the past and they were trying to get back to their time. And instead of trying to, I think the wormhole itself may have closed. And the only way to actually travel into the future without using the wormhole is they actually approached the speed of light but never hit it. So they allowed time to move slow for them while time was moving quicker for everyone else just to catch up to their time zone or their point in time, which I thought was, at the time, I didn't realize how brilliant it was until I did the research for this, and I was like, whoa, that was smart.
Isn't that like a
How did the
slingshot?
writers come up with this crap? Oh, yeah.
Isn't that like a slingshot theory?
Yeah, same idea, right? Because they're talking about speed.
Yep.
So I'm going to throw another curveball in there. Being frozen. Cryogenics.
Okay.
That's like the illusion of time travel.
It is.
It's
but
not.
It's still time travel.
Actually, I'm going to buy into this one for a second.
Bite into it.
What we're talking about is the experience of time, right? So if you are, let's go back to the interstellar concept. If you move closer to an event horizon and you experience time differently than the people on planet Earth, they assume you die because the time dilation is so dramatic. You feel like you've experienced 60 seconds. What about Walt frickin' Disney when he wakes up 300 years from now? He's still going to think it's like 1924. Like, how is that not the same thing? It's him that's experienced the time differently, not the rest of the people around us. I actually I'm into this one, Shannon. I like the idea.
You don't
Reality
have
is
to go
perception.
anywhere. You don't have to get squished by gravity. You just stay in one spot and stay frozen. Assuming there's power to keep you frozen.
What about freezer burn?
He's going to have other complications, yes.
I think they put you in a good saran wrap and vacuum seal you.
But one of the things that they talk about in a lot of movies that do space travel is cryogenics, so that way you don't experience, aging, hunger, health issues during your travel. And that's assuming that, they're thinking about light years as like how long it takes to travel. If it takes 300 light years to travel somewhere, that's 300 for the speed of light. We can't move at the speed of light. We've got to move at this speed. That's assuming that you don't have all of these gravitational waves changing the way that you experience space-time. When you're traveling through space, that's not going to be linear. So I still think that like the concept of cryogenics and the way that people are talking about this or thinking about this as a potential of dealing with how long space travel takes, Shannon's kind of onto something in that correlation. But what I also want to say is if we as engineers design that travel correctly, you wouldn't experience that 300 years at all anyway.
I'm not buying. I fold.
Yeah, I'm not buying on it. I'm sorry. I don't.
It's the workaround. It's not the solution.
It is not time travel. Period. I get it. It's like it's a solution, like for someone who wants to, let's say we want to make it to Ursa Minor or something, and there's no way I can do it in my lifetime. I get that, for space travel, but it's definitely not time travel. Time travel is a manipulation of time, of taking me instantly either forward or backwards in time, versus you're talking a medical procedure. You're talking about science itself and making sure that, can a body survive in such low temperatures?
So it sounds like to me you want more teleportation than you do time travel.
Oh, I want that too. Teleportation would be amazing.
I would
but
take that.
I'll take a wormhole.
But teleportation, I think, is more in the aspect of what we were talking about with 3D printing. I'm sorry to say, taking our bodies, literally destroying them because it scanned them and rebuilding them on a different spot. That's the way I think teleportation is going to exist. It's not going to be the same body that went from point A to point B. Even in Star Trek, they talk about it. Teleportation, the teleporters are not, you're not the same person. You're literally transported through atom by atom and reconstructed on the other side.
I prefer the idea of wormholes on a small scale rather than destroying my body and recreating it.
So
well, the wormhole is going to be too much of a gravitational force on your body. Your body's not going to survive. So, but can I send a data stream through that wormhole and have you rebuilt on the other side? That is a possibility.
So do you subscribe to artificially creating a wormhole? Just the size that you want it? Like a tight hole? Like small?
Like a very tight hole? Yes. Micro wormholes. We're going to go with that term. Yes.
Toit?
I'm going to go back to what
Toiga.
Josh just said, where he was saying like wormholes on a small scale. I'm not following. What do you mean by that?
I'm thinking similar to computers when they were first created, just a space that's literally a wormhole from one side of the world to the other, where you drop into and you go into a building. So you go into some kind of pod, wormhole opens up over your head or below you, and then transports you to the other side of the world or some other location.
Like an elevator.
Yeah, in a way, in the sense that we're trying to do in space, right? Create a wormhole so that we can travel to another galaxy as quickly as possible, while keeping everything inside intact.
So there's an interesting debate
some kind of
about
bubble. I'm forgetting the name of that bubble.
Like a bank tube.
like a bank tube.
In layman's terms, yeah.
An interesting debate about teleportation, in the sense of like, we know that we can send particles. The boson particle, I think, was one example, right? And one of the things that we aren't sure of is, will those particles have memory, right? So even if we can send particles, would they have memory of their former form and be able to be reconstructed? A lot of physicists say no. Some like to teeter with the idea and say, okay, even if they were, would your consciousness follow? I don't know. I think we're not even far enough through neuroscience to even understand how the brain works. Why would we think it could be reconstructed yet? Like, we're so far away from any of this. The other concept is like, some people subscribe to the concept of a soul. So if your body is destroyed, could your soul re-find it? I don't know. I'm not a soul believer, but I know that some people are. It's very, I think there's a lot of like concerns with this. Teleport me a chocolate bar. Let's not worry about a person.
Okay, Willy Wonka. I better be able to eat that damn chocolate bar on the other side.
And it better taste good.
You may be able to eat it, but it may be full of radiation by that point.
Well, that's the other thing, is like, we're talking different particles. Yes, they've talked about transporting particles like boson particles, but we're talking about particles that have no mass. What about particles that have mass? What about anything that can actually go faster than the speed of light? Because that is one of the constants of the universe, is if it can go faster than the speed of light, it can't have mass. So,
well, there's the theory of tachyons.
There we go.
And that's where we start getting into that. And that's just theory, right? Because we haven't really discovered anything at that level, but everything starts as a theory. So
Star Trek uses them all the time.
I think there are a lot of things that are theories that we pretty much operate off of, like gravity being a theory. Like most science is theoretical, and we tend to have that tag on it until we observe something that disproves it. That's just how science functions, right? Like there is no such thing as fact. It's just what we consider to be, the current truth of the world until we observe otherwise, right? That's the way that science is meant to operate. So I
Fact
don't
is
really
something that we haven't disproven yet,
Yep.
right? That's
exactly.
all it is.
And it's one of those things that I don't really try to take the word theory lightly, but what I do take lightly is the concept of tachyons. Like, was this just some random person's idea of like this could be, potentially exist based on math, or have we observed anything? Like this to me just seems like someone stretching the envelope a little more than they should.
What's a tachyon? Is it an alien? Because I'm imagining an alien.
It's a hypothetical
What-
particle that can travel faster than the speed of light.
Okay, was it in the documentary that you sent me?
No, it was in the notes. Actually, it was
Okay.
mentioned in the documentary.
It was in the documentary and the notes.
It was not in Hot Tub Time Machine.
You don't know, you haven't seen it.
It was
I have actually.
It
Oh, you
wasn't
were the one
water.
of
It
the
was
ones that-
tachyon goo.
Yeah. Actually, it was alcohol, and it could have been in it. You don't know.
So the
They
concept
spilled
of
it on the flux
tachyons
capacitor.
hypothetically could travel faster than the speed of light. But again, like hypothetically, I can travel 3 times faster than the speed of light myself because I'm that freaking fast. I run faster than Usain Bolt. I'm the fastest human alive. Have you ever seen me? I just went to the bathroom right now, hypothetically. Like, what's the difference between a tachyon and me saying this shit?
I mean, you could have literally just went to the bathroom. We just don't know it. But
We have
anyway,
no idea.
Don't be the Flash and changing the timeline, please. Barry Allen fucks us up for us all already.
That was a terrible movie.
Didn't that guy go to jail?
Yeah, unfortunately.
there's a lot of different things.
I like the character, okay? Just don't look at the actor.
So did
That's-
Danny Masterson, and that still pisses me off.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of deserved it.
He did, but it still pisses me off. I grew up with that bastard. Not
Yeah.
really, but through the show.
We
For
could
all
talk
the
about
fun.
another show on how our role models have let us down. We'll talk about that later.
So back to tachyons. When they say hypothetical, is it as hypothetical as this extreme example that I just gave, or is there actual like backing to this idea?
I think it's really just theoretical, right? Because we can't even see anything moving faster than light. We don't have the technology or the capability of doing that yet. So I don't know. It seems like it's something that Einstein believed in, so I believe in it too, because he's bigger brain than me.
Well, it's just knowing that we don't know everything, right? And we're nowhere close to that. We always talk about black matter, exotic matter, and all these different things that could be a possibility, but there's no way for us to know quite yet. I'm sorry. We know there's more to it. We just don't know what it is. I mean, hell, we can't even leave our solar system yet, so we can't think about it that far yet.
We're nowhere near even a type 2 civilization. So, and the other thing that really kind of limits our boundaries, and this is something that I always find interesting as well, is that we as humans are limited based on the electromagnetic spectrum, right? There's only a very small area in there that we can even experience. What about the rest? We can measure some of it and we can measure a good chunk of it, but how much exists beyond the electromagnetic spectrum that we haven't discovered yet? That's not to say that there is anything. It might be nothing. Maybe our electromagnetic spectrum theory is everything that we've ever witnessed, but what if it's not? And that's the idea of science, is to kind of explore those ideas and see if they can find things. But until it's observed, sounds like a fantasy to me.
Right. And before we get any haters out there with your soul comments, it's the same thing, right? I think that's one of the biggest arguments with science. I'm a scientist. I like knowing that, but I'm also religious, because to be honest, how can you tell me if I'm right or wrong either way, right? And I think that's the way that we should all take life. We should be able to look at something and be like, well, this is how I know it as of today, but I can't tell you that's actually 100% the truth, right? Nobody should ever come to the table and be like, space travel is not true, it's not possible, and we can't do time because I said so, right? Nobody should go that far. So I think having an open mind is definitely the way we are all going to, succeed in the future, and watch Skynet devour all of us and kill us because we're probably in their way. But, stuff like that. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life in Cyber. Thanks for all our listeners tuning in. Remember, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share with your friends, and don't forget to drop your questions to us at podcast@lifeincyber.com. I don't even know how to log into that. Until next time, stay curious, stay secure, and find your equilibrium. This is Life in Cyber signing off. Thank you.
Very, very good, John.
Subscribe. I got a fun little tidbit for you all before we go. Remember
we're done.
No.
Subscribe.
It's quick. Remember that you matter unless you're multiplied by the speed of light squared, then your energy.
And that's it.